Hey, this is Andrew Brown from Exam Pro. In this follow along, we're going to be taking a look at NetPolicy. So again, I want you to launch your micro K8s environment that we set up earlier in the course. And what we're going to do here is just type in clear and get started here. So in order for us to use NetPolicies, we're going to have some kind of CNI, CNI plugin, right? And so there's a variety of different kinds, but for kubectl, they don't have a whole lot of options. We just have Cilium, so I'm not sure if that's the proper way to pronounce it, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it here. We're going to type in kubectl status, or sorry, micro K8 status. And give it a moment here to load. And so there might be other options here, but the only one that I recognize here is called Cilium. And so that's going to allow us to have full network policies. All right. So we'll go down below here and we're just going to type in micro K8s enable and then put in Cilium. And then once that's in there, what we're going to need, it's just taking a second here, what we're going to need is to have some namespaces. So with network policies, we can isolate based on, or like control traffic based at the pod level or at the namespace level. I'm going to do it at the namespace level for this example because we don't need to go super deep into net policies. We just need to get something working. And I'll just pull up while that's going. We'll type in NetPolicies Kubernetes and see what the documentation gives us. All right, and so here we are. If we just scroll on down, so here is a general network policy. Ours is going to be a lot simpler than this. This has ingress and egress, and it's quite fancy. So what we'll do is go back here and see if it's ready. It's not yet, but I already kind of know what we need to do. So what we'll do is we will create 3 different namespaces and we'll launch a server or a deployment into each of them. And the idea is that we'll have one namespace that we'll try to talk to, and one will be blocked and one will not be. Okay, so what we'll do is create our namespaces. We'll type in kubectl ns for short for namespace. You can type namespace if you want, but ns, and we'll have one called fire. And create. And then we'll have fire, ice, and wind. And so those will be our 3 namespaces that we'll be using. Then we'll have to launch some pods. I don't feel like launching our Selector app, so I'm just going to deploy Nginx. All right, and so we'll just put the image in here and say Nginx, and we'll make sure the namespace is for fire. And so we'll hit up here, and then what we'll do one is for ice. And then we'll do one for wind. Okay, and so now we should have all our pods. So we'll just type in kubectl get pods and ice wide. Hit up again. No resources found in the ice namespace. What if I just type in pods here? Huh. I guess the deploys are still happening. Let's just get deploys. Maybe just without the there. Okay, and so we see that they're ready, but they're not doing anything here. So I wonder if we've like used up all of our resources on the machine. So what we'll do is get deploy. We'll say describe deploy -end ice. And we'll say ice nginx, and we'll see what it's complaining about. There's no errors, so maybe it's just taking time. I mean, we are doing all this stuff over here, so I'm not sure if that was conflicting with it. We are seeing a connection refused issue, so it looks like this probably didn't install properly. Okay. And we'll go back here and do a get pods. Okay, yeah, so it just took some time here. Now, this didn't work out. I've never seen that happen before. I'm just checking here. Created. Because when I did this, it never failed, eh? So we'll try one more time and see if we need to do that. So it's already enabled. So I'm not sure about all these errors. I don't know if this is going to run us into an issue, but if we create our network policy and it doesn't work, we'll know that we don't have it properly installed, but maybe we have enough installed and we'll be lucky, okay? So looks like all of our pods are running and stuff like that. So what we're going to need to do is basically ping a pod from one other pod. And so what we'll do, I'm just going to write out a command here. So we'll have to do kubectl -n, choose a namespace. So I'm going to do fire. Then we're going to have our pod name, and then we're going to curl a IP address to somewhere. And maybe, I guess the idea is like this IP address is going to be like what we want to access. So we'd say, okay, from an ice pod, hit this fire IP address. Okay, that's what we're going to do. So what I'll do is just type in clear, and the first thing we need is that pod name. So we'll go and type in kubectl get pods n ice. We'll go ahead and grab that name on there. I'm going to just move back there. And then what we'll do is get fire -o wide, because we're going to need its IP address. So there is its IP address. Okay, and then we'll go to the right here and paste that on in. And it's complaining about this because maybe we forgot a word like exec. There we go. Great, and so the idea is Nginx is running an Nginx page if you hit this. And so we can access the Fire server from the ICE server, okay? And just to show for the wind one, so we'll do wind here, and then we'll go ahead and grab wind. Okay. We'll go ahead and delete this out. Great. So right now we don't have network policy in place, so it makes sense that they're able to communicate. So now what we'll do is create ourselves a network policy. I'm going to call it netpol fire YAML. And what we'll need to do is grab us some code. So go to the network policy page we have up here. This is way too much. We don't need this much code, but we'll go here. And I don't feel like dealing with egress. So egress means leaving the pod. Ingress would be incoming from the pod or container. So we'll delete out the egress here. And I'm just going to take a look off screen here to the policy that I created. Okay. And we're going to rename this. So it says netpol fire to ice. So that's what it's going to be. So we're going to allow communication from fire to ice, or I should say ice to fire. Ice can communicate with fire, okay, but wind won't be able to communicate with fire, but it's all about fire. So we'll just call it netpol fire here. And then what we'll need is a pod selector. So what we're saying is this is going to apply for our fire Nginx, right? So select all those pods. And then we need a policy type. So we only want ingress, so we'll just take that out for now. And then from here, they have like a from, and they're doing IP block. Notice there's a namespace selector, pod selector. They're just showing a lot more information than we need. This is going to be on port 80, just because that's going to be how we're doing the curl, is just on a port 80 HTTP there. And so we're not going to do pod selector. We're just going to do namespace selector. So anything from that namespace will be able to communicate. And so what we'll do here is just change this. We'll need to figure out what the label is. We're not going to do IP, so we don't care about that. But what we'll do is figure out what kind of label we can apply here, because that's what we're going to need. So what we'll do is type in kubectl get namespace wind. Actually, we want describe probably here, and see what kind of labels we have. So this is a label. So we'll do is just grab this part here and paste that on in. And then this part is going to be wind. All right, and so that should work. We have to specify this is the fire namespace, because it's definitely not in the default namespace. And double checking, looks okay to me. All right, so let's go ahead and give it a deploy. So we'll type in apply f k8s netpol fire.yaml. It's created the file, so hopefully it works. We'll type in kubectl get netpol -n fire. Then we'll describe its contents just to see what there is here. And so it's saying pod selector is for fire, allowing ingress traffic to port 80. So traffic into port 80 to fire, but only from wind. Okay, so ice should not work and wind should work. So now if we just hit up, we already set this up before, and and we'll just hit up until we find the commands we want. So we'll try Wind first, and Wind was able to download the page, no problem. And then we will go over to Ice, and it's working. So if they're both working and the policy's in place, that means that Cilium is definitely not installed properly. So what I'm going to do here is type in microKS, disable Cilium. See, now when I ran this, it was smooth as butter. I just enabled it, had no problems. So I'm not sure why we're having problems here, but we'll disable it and then maybe we'll re-enable it and hopefully it works. But if the network policy is not in place, then that's why it would not be working, okay? All right, and so now we'll enable it again, and hopefully it'll just work. Because maybe when we were installing it, there was just like network connectivity issues, not relating to our environment, but just what we were downloading it from. And so I'll see you back here in a moment when this is done downloading, okay? And hopefully it installs properly. All right, so it looks like we're still having this error. Now, again, I did this same environment, just a different account, and had no problems with it. So I just don't trust this environment. I feel like there's something wrong with it. So what I'm going to do is just type in, I'm going to make a new volume. So this will be micro K8s of NetPol, env. And so this will be our environment specifically dedicated for testing this example here. So I'm going to go back here. Again, you might not have this problem. It might work perfectly for you, and you'll just proceed forward with no problems. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and set up a new pod here. So we'll go ahead, or sorry, environment. So I'm going to spin up this new environment. I'm going to make my way over to the AWS console, right? And from there, I want to go to EC2. And I'm going to just see if there's any new machines here. I'm not sure why it's not spinning up another machine. Not having much luck here today. We'll go back to EC2. Normally EC2 instances show up pretty fast, so I'm kind of just surprised. There it is, okay. And so we'll go to our network policy environment just for this case. We'll go ahead and go over to our volumes. And I'm going to click into the storage. I'm going to modify it. We're going to set it to 40 gigabytes so we don't have any problems here. And then I'm just going to wait for this environment to start up. Here, then we want to install micro K8, so we'll go micro, I mean, it's just snap, so, well, we'll go to the website, micro K8s. And just quickly reinstall micro K8s on this environment because it was so easy since last time we did it. So we'll paste that on in there. And it looks like our volume has resized, so it shouldn't be a problem here. Probably shouldn't be running commands unless we know it's been resized, but you know, I just want to get it done. And so micro K8s there, we'll have kubectl. And then we learned from our fix that we can do micro K8s config and then do kube config. Maybe we'll have to touch that file first. Just make an empty file. Well, maybe we type in kubectl and maybe it'll generate out that directory for us. All right, remember we have to type these things in. So we'll go and paste that on in. Then we'll paste that on in. Then we'll paste that on in. Then we'll type in micro k8s kubectl, get pods, and then it'll download. Oh no, it didn't have to download it. Great. And so maybe we'll hit up now to that line we have here. There we go. And so now it did that. And so now I can do kubectl get pods. Good. And now I'm going to just make sure I have enough space on this drive here. And I'm just looking for the drive. Usually it's 10, but we set it to 40 gigabytes. So looking for it here. It's still at basically 10. So we'll go over to our EC2 instance, back to it. And I'm just going to go ahead and reboot it. And we'll give that a moment to reconnect. And so if this works, that'll be great. If it doesn't, that would suck, but I hope it does. Worst case scenario, I could always just open my other environment and show it there, but it's just kind of frustrating if I can't replicate it here. And if this hangs too long, you can just hit refresh. Sometimes that helps here too when it's doing a reconnect here. Or if it does that, another thing I do is just go back to the Cloud9 interface here. And then I would open up NetPol. And if it is rebooted, we can go back here and just double check. So it's 2 out of 2. I guess whenever it decides to connect, I'll be back here in a moment, okay? All right, so I did a few refreshing, and then finally it let me back in here, so it's not always perfect when reconnecting. So we'll type in micro k8 status to see what we have installed, because this is now completely fresh here. Micro K8s status. There we go. We had to wait for it to get running there again. I'm going to scroll up here, and so all we have is the HA cluster. So we'll want DNS for sure. So we'll go here and say enable DNS, and then we want Cilium, right? So we'll go here and grab Cilium. And so I expect DNS to install without issue, but I'm hoping Cilium just works with a fresh environment. So this will take a little bit of time, but I will wait until it's done here, and I'll see you back here in a moment, okay? All right, so look, it actually worked no problem this time. So for whatever reason, the old environment's just kind of bust, at least for that particular use case. So we will have to backpedal here and redo a lot of the stuff we just did, which is not a big deal. It's not going to take too long to do. So I guess we'll just go ahead and do it again. And practice makes perfect, right? So we need our namespaces. So we'll say create ns fire, create ice, create wind, and then we need to create deployments. So deploy fire nginx, image nginx, -n fire, and then we got ice. Okay, and then we got wind. Great, and so then from here, what we'll do is we'll create ourselves a new file, which will be our netpol fire YAML. And we'll go back to our original environment here that we were running, and I'm going to go ahead and just grab this file here. We'll go ahead and paste that on in. Okay, and that looks what we were using before, so it's totally fine. And so we'll type in kubectl apply -f. Actually, before we do, let's go make sure we can communicate between our nodes. So let's remember what that command is. So it's kubectl, kubectl -n fire exec, and then we need our pods here. So we'll say new terminal. So say kubectl get pods and fire, or sorry, ice. And then we'll say wind. And then for fire, we need -o wide. And so we'll go ahead and grab our IP address here, paste that on in. We'll go ahead and grab this one here. And this is actually going to be for, I think it was wind here a moment ago. Already kind of forgot. And I believe it goes here. Oh, the first one is ice. Wind. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it says ice here. So change that to ice. And I believe it was -- curl and then localhost, or I guess whatever the IP address is. Yeah, there we go. Okay, great. So this one's set up, and then I'm just going to quickly do the wind. So we'll do wind. And then that one wind. Okay, great. So that works, no problem. Now let's go ahead and deploy our network policy. So we'll do kubectl apply -f netpol fire YAML. And so it created it. And so now what we can do is go hit up, try out wind. It works fine. Try out ice. It works fine. Okay, so one of those should have hung, like it should have not worked, but it didn't. So maybe there's something wrong with our selectors. It does say roll up here, which doesn't seem right to me. So let me go back over here. Now, like Cilium definitely did not install properly, so I don't think our network policy was our problem. I do believe that it wasn't installed correctly. But let's just take a look at the actual selector name. So we'll say describe pods and fire, because I think it's just app by default. Yeah, so it is. So we'll change this to app. Okay. And then we'll have to redeploy our fire policy. We'll type clear. I'm just trying to find our commands that we typed below. Maybe it's in this screen here. There we go. So does ice work? Notice that ice is hanging. Look, it can't connect, right? Because we said that wind is allowed to have access and not ice. And so we go to wind, and there we go. So that's all there was to it. Unfortunately, we had to take a bunch of detours there. But, you know, that's the learning experience, and that's the hard parts that you're looking to watch. So that's pretty much it. And you can delete this environment because we're done with it. So what we'll do is close the network policy environment, and we'll go back over to our environments here. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this one because we are done with it. Okay. There you go. And I'll see you in the next one.